Hey everybody, hope everybody had a happy Memorial Day weekend to you and your families. And from all of us here on the channel, I want to first of all say thank you to all the men and women who help support our country and protect our country and allow us to have the freedom that we have in this great country. And thank you to all of you and to all the families who have come before us in order to protect our country and our freedoms here in the United States. Well, guys, by now, most of you know that we lost a great one over the weekend. We lost Phil Robertson. And when we're talking about Phil Robertson, also known as the Duck Commander, aka the Duck Commander, it hits home with a lot of us, I think. I'm going to tell you, the point of this video is to tell you a little bit about the impact that Phil Robertson had and to pay tribute to the impact that he had on me as a waterfowl hunter, but not only as a waterfowl hunter, as an individual, in my faith as well. And it's kind of ironic that those two, he has a correlation to those two things for me. Growing up, coming up through the years, I've been duck hunting now. I've been doing this for a long, long time, guys. Since I was a kid, I was 5 years old, following my dad through the swamps of Louisiana, my grandfather. Literally, before I could carry a gun, I was learning how to walk the swamps with him, to hunt wood ducks on our family property that we had back in the day that we were learning. We'd do some wood duck hunting where I cut my teeth at. And from that time, I was learning, how to duck hunt, how to walk the swamps, everything that any young hunter does that's brought up in the outdoors with their parents, their grandparents, whoever it may be that teaches them. And back then, we weren't in the age of social media. So you didn't have YouTube, you didn't have Facebook, you didn't have TikTok, you didn't have none of these platforms digital wise to go and be able to learn anything about the craft, about your craft, about the outdoors, how to hunt, how to fish, all that type of stuff. You either had to read books, or as I got older, guys, and I got into my teenage years and into my later teenage years, they had VHS tapes that started hitting all of the outdoor stores. They were at your local outdoor stores. You'd see them. They had a TV set up in those stores a lot of times. If it was like a mom and pop's owned hunting and fishing store, they'd have a TV set up with VHS tapes available from a new company out of Louisiana that people were becoming familiar with, called Duck Commander. And I remember, outside of my family, learning what I was learning from my family, teaching me how to hunt, when those videos started coming out, that was a big influence on me as an outdoorsman, as a duck hunter, somebody who loved to waterfowl hunt and had a passion to learn how to waterfowl hunt, and hone my skills basically and become a better duck hunter. I wanted to be Phil Robertson. I wanted to be a part of that Duck Commander crew when I was learning how to duck hunt and coming up, watching those videos, and it would get me pumped up, to watch that in the off season and wait on another duck season to come around. And all of my friends who were duck hunters and outdoorsmen wanted to be a duck man, wanted to be part of that Duck Commander crew. We wanted to go out and buy Duck Commander calls, and we were so proud of the Duck Commander brand being from Louisiana, that we felt that we were part of that, almost, in a sense, if that makes sense, And, we'd watch and wait for those videos to come out every season. Every season we would wait for those videos to come out. And we would go to the store, and I'd get my mom to buy me the newest Duck Commander VHS tape so that we could pop it in that VCR when we got home, and watch that VHS tape over and over and over again. It was something magical about it, you know. And the way that they would explain and break down the hunts in those videos was unlike anything that was out there at the time, you know. It not only focused on the killing and the hunting, you know, but it also focused on how to approach the hunt, and, you know, ways to look at a hunt in different eyes for better success. It was a tips video, basically, also on top of all the action that was going on. And I remember, just as an example, I remember one of the coolest things in those early Duckman videos was like when Phil and them, they had a blind at their place up in North Louisiana. And that was one of the first times that I saw a group of guys actually cooking in a duck blind with a stove, cooking breakfast in a duck blind. And when I saw that, I remember me and my friends, we would talk about it. We were like, man, how awesome is that? Their blind's so badass. It's just so awesome that, you know, to have a stove in your duck blind, that was something that we wasn't accustomed to, for sure. You know, that we thought that was the coolest thing. And that's just one of the things I remember from my youth, us talking about and just thinking, man, one day I want to have a duck blind like that, where we could have a stove in it, we could have our property, and we could have our friends and family come together in that duck blind. We could cook breakfast and enjoy those hunts together. And I just remember that sticking out for some reason. You know, that was kind of unique for that time. But what I learned from those videos was the proper way to do things, the proper way to hunt. You know, the early Duckmen, like Duckman 1, now as an adult, you know, I do know personally Mr. Warren Coco, who was in Duckman 1, and his family, the Coco family. And to look back now and see somebody that I personally know, you know, being featured in one of those first videos that got it all kicked off and started, and the relationship and the conversation between him and Phil in that first Duckman video when they were breaking down the Maurepas Swamp, which is where Duckman 1 was filmed at, which I live 15 minutes from nowadays, and to see what it was then versus what it is now, and see kind of how they depicted that area back in the day whenever they shot that first video. It's pretty cool, guys, to see that, and to be able to go back and watch that. And what it makes me realize is even though those old videos are now, you know, whatever they are, 20, 25 years old, maybe even longer than that, you know, to see the way they approached it and to see the impact that they had on me as a youth hunter, and being able to learn how to hunt properly and give me ideas to make me a better hunter, it impacted me greatly. And then on top of that, guys, years later, one of my first jobs I had in college when I moved to Baton Rouge, went to LSU, I worked in the athletic department for while I was in school. And as I got to my senior year, I ended up getting a job at Bowie Outfitters. It's a local sporting goods store here in Baton Rouge. And at the time, there was no Cabela's, there was no Bass Pros in our area, so we had local sporting goods stores, kind of like we talked about earlier. And Bowie Outfitters was a local sporting goods store that I ended up working for, getting a job for when I was later on in college. And at that point, we were big into waterfowl hunting at the time, and I worked for a man named Mr. Robert Hackett, and he basically hired me on and said, hey, I need somebody who, you know, is knowledgeable in waterfowl hunting, to come and help out in the store, you know, with decoys, what do we need to order, this type of stuff. And we'd always have like a big season kickoff event that we would have in the store. And I remember he told me, he said, he came to me one year and he said, hey, he says, who's somebody that we could bring in for the sale event to kick off duck season and hunting season, but from the waterfowl standpoint. And I told him, I said, boy, if we could get Phil Robertson, the duck commander guys, I said that would be somebody that would probably draw some people in. And he said, man, I don't know if they do events like that, but I could reach out to them. And he said, I'll try to reach out to them and see if that's something that they would consider doing. And he went ahead and he did that. And ironically, what ended up happening was they agreed to come on down to Baton Rouge and come out for this big sale event that we had at the store. And they came over to Baton Rouge. They said we had a table set up for him, and it was him and Miss Kay Robertson, and it was Jace, and I believe Jep was there, if I remember right. And this was right around probably 2001, somewhere in that time frame. I think it was the first year that Bowie Outfitter had opened, if I remember right around 2001. And I was so excited when I found out he told me that they had agreed to come to Baton Rouge, come to the store. And I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to meet one of my icons in the industry, And that old saying goes that be careful with when you meet your heroes and your icons, because sometimes that doesn't always correlate to what you see on necessarily maybe TV or your perception of what you think they're like in person. And I have to tell you guys that when I had the opportunity at that event to meet Phil and to meet Miss Kay and to meet Jace, that they were exactly what I had thought they would be if I ever had the opportunity to meet them. They were the nicest, most genuine people that I had ever met in the outdoor industry that was a celebrity at that time. And what you see through the years with shows like Duck Dynasty and all that type of stuff, interviews that Phil did through the years, he was just a genuine person, always seemed like, and that's exactly what they were when I had the opportunity to meet them. And when I got that opportunity to meet them at that sales event down in Bowie in Baton Rouge, I went up to him, I shook his hand, I said, Mr. Robertson, I told him who I was. I was just a college student at the time. And I said, I'm a big outdoorsman. I said, I've always been a big fan. I basically kind of fanboyed out on him, to be honest with y'all. And he told me, he said, well, anybody who's a fan of waterfowl hunting is a friend of mine. He told me that. And he said, he asked me a little bit about myself, where I grew up at, and kind of what my history was growing up hunting wise, if I had hunted with my dad, or who had taught me to waterfowl hunt, or kind of had I picked it up on my own. And I kind of told him that situation. And he said, this industry will give you a relationship for life with other outdoorsmen that share our passion. He said, I'm going to tell you that right now. He said, whether you do this as a lifetime hunter, a lifelong hunter, he said, or he said, you do it for a certain amount of time. He said, you're going to meet people that become lifelong friends of yours. He said, and you'll always have this common passion, he says, as a correlation to each other. And at the time, it probably was like, okay, yeah, I understand that, but I probably didn't truly understand it like I do now as an older hunter now. And what I could tell you is that he was 100% correct. And many of you who have done this for a long time, you kind of know where I'm coming from with that. And this is not only a sport and a hobby that is about killing ducks and about killing animals. And a lot of people from the outside looking in think it's that way sometimes, but it's more than just that. He said, you're gonna find lifelong friends in this sport. He said, and you're gonna see that later down the road as you become older. And he told me that. But he said, another thing he said is that you're also gonna find that it brings you closer to God. And he started kind of preaching the gospel to me a little bit. when we started getting into that conversation, and he told me, he said, how's your relationship with God? And I said, well, I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with God. I said, I grew up and I was blessed enough to go to a Catholic school. My parents gave me a good education. I said, we weren't raised rich. We were poor. I said, but they found it important to give me a good education. I said, and I talk to God every day. I said, I feel like I have a relationship with God that's pretty solid. I said, he said, well, what you're going to also find is that I told you you'll find friends that last a lifetime. He said, but you're also going to find that this sport, oddly enough, will also strengthen your faith, and you're going to be closer to God through this sport of duck hunting as well. And I really didn't know what that meant at the time. I was like, okay, thinking to myself, how does that kind of correlate to duck hunting? But honestly, guys, through the years, it really did. It strengthened my faith with God. Waterfowl hunting has strengthened that faith for me personally. I have my 2 sons now that, when we step into a duck blind and you see a sunrise in a duck blind or a sunset in an afternoon hunt in a duck blind, there's something about it that will bring you closer to God at those moments, And when you take a shot on a bird and you take the life of that creature, and you go and you pick up that bird and you see the beauty of that bird, it brings you closer to God. It makes you respect that creature's life even more, and that God created something so beautiful that he allows us to go out there and be able to share experiences, meet other hunters, become lifelong friends with other people that enjoy our passion, but at the same time enjoy the creatures that we're pursuing. And that's the part for me that kind of reminisces and kind of comes back to me about that conversation that Mr. Robertson had with me at that event in Baton Rouge that I talked about. And now my sons, they're with me, and they come, duck hunting with me, and before every hunt we say a prayer, together as a family. And we always thank God. We ask God to, protect us on the journey out to our hunting spots. We ask him to, make sure that we return safely to our loved ones. And we ask him for that. We ask him to have a successful day in the blind, get back safely, and just take it all in, enjoy our surroundings, and not just focus on the hunt so much. And I guess as I've gotten older, I've really appreciated it more and more than I did when I probably started hunting early in my career. But I feel as a hunter now, I'm kind of coming full circle. And that conversation with Phil Robertson really has made an impact on me throughout the years. And especially now, I could relate to what he was trying to tell me then when I was in my early 20s, or starting out basically in this sport and in this hobby. And that's just my one story. That's the only time I ever got to meet Phil personally, but I had a really good conversation with him that day. We had agreed, just to tell y'all about that event, we had agreed to pay them. I think at the time, their fee was like $200, or maybe I think it might have been a little bit more than that actually, for them to come down to Bowie Outfitters. But when we went to pay him, my store manager, Mr. Robert Hackett, when he went to pay him, they actually didn't want the cash, and he was like, "Well, we gotta pay y'all. Y'all took a trip down from North Louisiana to come down to Baton Rouge and this and that." And what we ended up paying them with, guys, and what Miss K wanted was a set of cast iron pots, cooking pots that you cook in. The cast iron, you guys around duck camp, around hunt camp, you all know what that is, obviously. But she wanted a new set of cast iron pots, and that's how they asked us to pay them at that event at Bowie Outfitters in Baton Rouge, back around 2001 when they came down there. And I sat at that event after I had got an opportunity to talk to Phil. I talked to Jace. Jace was really a nice guy. And I watched Phil interact with the kids at that event. There were a lot of kids that had brought their duck calls to get autographs. He was taking time with each kid to teach them how to blow a duck call properly, and would interact with them as well as Jace did, and was really good with them, guys. Was really good with the people, and appreciated their fans showing up at that event. And that's just one event, you know. But he touched a lot of people's lives in the same way that he touched me as a waterfowl hunter and as an individual. And you always heard the stories about it. You know, I had some people that through the years, they would say, oh, you know, Robertson, I met him and he wanted to preach to me more than he wanted to talk about duck hunting. And I think that was his way to get through to individuals and to spread the word, to spread the gospel, you know. And, you know, I always looked at that as, hell, that's not a bad thing. That's something that the world needed more and more of, you know. And to see what he took his company and his family took his company from where it started to where it is nowadays, guys, you know, not only did he introduce more people to the sport of duck hunting and just expanded the community of waterfowl hunting in a positive manner, but also he expanded people's faith, you know. And that's probably his biggest legacy. If you could sit today and have a conversation with Phil and ask him what his legacy is on waterfowl hunting, he would probably tell you that spreading the gospel was his biggest legacy. You know, yes, the duck hunting was one thing, and that was awesome, but he also would tell you that getting people closer to God was probably one of the most important things he ever did in his career as the duck commander. So, I don't know, guys. It's one of them days. It feels like there's a void in our community. It feels like there's a void in my heart. I know a lot of you feel the same way. A lot of people know him much better than I knew him personally, on a personal level. But even those of us who didn't know him quite as well as some, I think we all feel like we've lost a key member of our family today, as it's now the day after his passing. But what I look at, guys, is that the ground that he laid in this industry and in this sport is going to be something that carries on for generations. There's never going to be a time as a duck hunter that people are not going to talk about Phil Robertson and remember Phil Robertson. They're always going to remember the good that he did for our sport. And if you had the opportunity to meet him or listen to him speak, the good that he may have done for you as an individual, and maybe even individuals that had nothing to do with waterfowl hunting or no interest in waterfowl hunting, that maybe came across him speaking of the gospel. I know a lot of people, it's going to be different for us not seeing him around, but with his family and the groundwork that he's laid, I think that you're going to see the Duck Commander brand and, you know, business continue to grow, and they're going to carry on Phil's traditions and Phil's beliefs and his vision for the company and for touching other hunters. You're already seeing it with his sons, and then now some of his grandkids, and they're going to carry on what he started. And being a fellow Louisianian, I just want to say I'm proud to be a part of that culture, to be a part of that community. And we're going to miss you, Phil. We're going to miss you, but you're never going to be forgotten. And that's the positive. And I want to thank you for what you did for the waterfowl hunting community. And I want to thank you for that conversation about my faith and where it would lead me as an adult in this great sport. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking the opportunity to speak to a young college student who loved to duck hunt, that grew up in a small town with a poor family, that idolized you and wanted to be a duck man. Thank you for that opportunity. Rest in peace, Phil Robertson. We love you. And we love all the Duck Commander family, from all of us duck hunters out there. Thank you. And have a good one.